The courtroom was far colder than Diane expected. Not just the air, though it bit at her skin like February wind, but the silence, the glances, the way the judge's gaze hovered just a moment longer when their eyes met. Coldness lived here in every stare, every click of a heel on the marble floor, every neatly printed docket page. Diane Bartlett, 59 years old, hands folded tightly in her lap, sat on the left side of the courtroom behind a row of tired lawyers. Her daughter, Emily, wasn't there. That was the whole point. 2 months ago, Diane had filed for emergency custody of her 4-year-old granddaughter, Ava, after Emily disappeared, again. Rehab, maybe. Or worse. Diane didn't know. What she did know was that Ava needed safety, and her ex-son-in-law, Ryan, wasn't it. Now, here she sat, painted as a vindictive woman. A bitter mother-in-law. A manipulator. Across the aisle, Ryan looked pristine. Clean-shaven. Navy blazer. Perfect father. His attorney, Margaret Fielding, stood with the casual confidence of someone who already knew how the case would end. The judge, Honorable Charles Wexler, leaned forward, eyes narrowed. Mrs. Bartlett, he said, voice level. Do you understand that you're under oath? Yes, Your Honor, Diane replied, her voice steady despite the thud in her chest. Your testimony asserts that Mr. Blake was verbally and emotionally abusive toward your granddaughter. And that your daughter, his ex-wife, feared for the child's safety? Diane nodded. Yes. But you offer no medical evidence. No police reports. Just your word. You also have a history. Fielding cut in. Objection, Your Honor. Sustained, the judge said quietly. Then he turned back to Diane. Let me rephrase. He stared for a beat too long. Did you lie under oath just to hurt her? To influence the custody decision in your favor? The room fell silent. There was a sharp intake of breath behind her, maybe from someone watching, maybe from nowhere at all. Diane didn't answer. Not yet. She reached into her purse, her hand trembled, not with fear, but the kind of trembling that comes after too many sleepless nights, too many coffee cups left untouched, too many calls unanswered. She pulled out a small black flash drive and placed it gently on the witness stand. I'd like to submit this as evidence, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Fielding scoffed audibly. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. That drive has not been entered into discovery, and it's from the baby monitor, Diane interrupted. From the old unit in Ava's nursery. It recorded everything for 3 days before I found it. I didn't know it was on. Judge Wexler leaned back. What exactly is on it? A conversation. Between Mr. Blake and Ava. And later, between him and someone else. The judge nodded toward the bailiff. We'll take a brief recess while the contents are reviewed. Fielding jumped to her feet. Your Honor, we object to any recess, but the judge held up a hand. If this is legitimate evidence, it may be critical. If it's fabricated, he glanced at Diane again. We'll deal with that accordingly. Diane met his gaze. Firm now. Steady. She had nothing left to prove, only the truth to reveal. As the courtroom emptied, Diane sat alone in the echoing chamber. Her hands were cold. Her throat dry. But something inside her, that fierce, tired place where love never turned off, stayed quiet and still. She could still hear Ava's voice from that night. Tiny. Curious. Asking why Daddy was yelling. At the wall, and then Ryan's voice. Unaware. Careless. Words that no 4-year-old should ever hear. Words that stripped away his polished courtroom mask. She had tried to forget. Tried to bury it under court dates and sleepless nights. But now, it was time. Outside the courtroom door, Ryan stood with his lawyer, jaw clenched tight. For the first time, his eyes avoided hers. Let them review the tape, she thought. Let them hear what I heard. Justice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishing Ryan or rescuing Emily from herself. It was about Ava, the only one who didn't get to choose what family she was born into. The bailiff returned, his face unreadable. They're calling everyone back in. Diane stood. Her knees ached from the cold. But she walked tall. The judge hadn't seen the truth yet, but he would, and when he did, everything would change. The courtroom filled slowly this time, the quiet hum of conversation replaced by something heavier, anticipation. Diane sat down without looking around. She could feel the shift in the room, like people had begun to doubt what they thought they knew. Margaret Fielding whispered something urgently to Ryan as they returned to their table. He kept his eyes fixed forward, one knee bouncing under the table, jaw twitching like he was chewing invisible gum. Diane had never seen him this still. Not even at Ava's 3rd birthday party when he got into that quiet argument with Emily. In the hallway. Not when he told Emily she was nothing but a sad burden with a uterus. The judge re-entered, straightening his robe before sitting. His expression was unreadable. We've reviewed the recording, he said, tapping the bench lightly with a pen. Counselors, you've both been given a copy. I will allow a portion to be played for the court. Fielding stood. Your Honor, again, this evidence was not submitted, Ms. Fielding, Wexler said calmly. Your client is heard on tape. His identity is not in dispute. I will allow the court to hear a portion and determine its relevance. A click, then a hum, then, static, the court reporter stopped typing, then came the voice. Don't look at me like that, Ava. Jesus. You think I want to come here? You think this place doesn't smell like your grandmother's medicine cabinet? Ava's voice, faint and sweet, where's Mommy? A pause. A sharp exhale, she's gone, okay? And if Grandma keeps pushing this crap, you'll never see her again. Then something thudded, not loud, just enough to make Diane flinch. A drawer maybe. Then another voice, a female one. Laughing. You're gonna get yourself in trouble, Ree. Let em try, Ryan's voice said. You know Diane. She's just a sad, bored nurse with a savior complex. She thinks raising Ava will fix her screw-up daughter. Let her try. She's got no proof. The sound crackled and stopped, dead silence. Diane didn't move. She didn't need to. The room had already turned. Ryan sat frozen, eyes darting toward Fielding, who was visibly pale now. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Judge Wexler leaned forward. Mr. Blake, do you deny that is your voice? Ryan didn't answer. Let me be clear, the judge continued, more forcefully. Do you deny saying those words to your daughter? Do you deny calling your former mother-in-law a liar, and threatening to keep Ava from her mother? Still nothing. Finally. Ryan shifted in his seat. I didn't mean it like that. It was out of context. Fielding stood quickly. Your Honor, with respect, this audio is incomplete. We don't know the emotional circumstances surrounding the recording. The emotional circumstances, Wexler said dryly, include verbal intimidation of a minor child and a potential attempt to manipulate this court. He turned to Diane. Mrs. Bartlett. Thank you for providing this recording. Can you confirm when it was made? Diane cleared her throat. 4 months ago. The monitor was still plugged in. I didn't even realize until I went through Ava's things after Emily left again. Why didn't you present it earlier? I thought. I didn't want to make things worse. I thought if I said enough, someone would believe me without it. Wexler gave a slow, measured nod. Then he looked at the gallery behind her. We are in recess for 15 minutes. When we return, I will issue a ruling regarding temporary custody, and we will address the implications of this recording. This court does not take lightly the manipulation of evidence or coercion of a child. The gavel came down. As chairs scraped. And people filed out. Diane felt her lungs fill with something she hadn't breathed in weeks, air that didn't choke. She stepped into the hallway and leaned against the wall. A bailiff passed by and offered a respectful nod. For the first time, someone wasn't looking through her. They were seeing her. A quiet voice broke the moment. Ms. Bartlett. She turned. A young woman stood near the water fountain. Clean blazer. No makeup. Her hair pulled tight in a low bun. From the Child Protective Services team, Diane guessed. I just wanted to say. The woman hesitated. I've read a lot of these files. Heard a lot of stories. But not many people come in and fight like that. You didn't need to keep that recording. Most people would have erased it. Diane offered a small, tired smile. I wasn't most people. I'm her grandmother. The woman nodded slowly, then walked away. Diane stayed where she was, her hands finally still. Inside the courtroom, people would talk. Lawyers would maneuver. Papers would shuffle. But something had shifted, not because Diane was clever, not because she wanted to win, but because sometimes, the truth just sits quietly in the corner, recording, and one day, it speaks. 15 minutes, that was all the judge had given. Diane sat outside the courtroom, her hands folded neatly in her lap, but inside, she was nowhere near still. Her legs ached, not from standing or sitting too long, but from the invisible weight that had lived inside her since Emily first started disappearing. 15 minutes, people moved past her, attorneys, clerks, 2 women from CPS, and 1 man in a pinstripe suit talking loudly on the phone about a completely different case. The courthouse hallway felt like a hospital waiting room, fluorescent lights, pale walls, too much silence punctuated by too many hushed conversations. Diane could hear Ryan's voice in her head again, distorted now by shame and memory. She's just a sad, bored nurse with a savior complex. She had heard worse over the years, some of it from her own daughter during the worst of her addiction. But hearing it in that cold, recorded tone had been different. It wasn't just an insult. It was a strategy. A worldview. He didn't just see her as the enemy, he saw her as disposable. She glanced across the hall to where Ryan stood alone near the vending machines. Fielding was gone, likely making calls. Ryan looked smaller now. The tailored blazer hung stiffly on his frame, and his arms were crossed too tightly, like he was trying to hold himself in place. For a moment, Diane almost pitied him, but Then she remembered Ava's face the last time Diane picked her up from Ryan's house, the way the little girl's shoulders had tensed when Ryan raised his voice to the dog. The way she clung to Diane's sweater with small, silent fingers that said please don't leave me here. Diane's phone buzzed in her purse. A message from CPS case manager, JEV, appeared. Need to confirm Ava's current sleeping arrangements. Please respond ASAP. We're reviewing for emergency placement status. She replied quickly, thumb shaking slightly as she typed, Ava has her own room. Twin bed. Night light. I sleep across the hall. She's been with me 7 weeks. The reply came moments later. Thank you. We'll confirm on-site next week. Be well. Diane put the phone away. For once, she didn't feel like she had to over-explain. Just the truth. No performance. A quiet voice approached, Mrs. Bartlett? It was Judge Wexler's clerk, a thin man with tired eyes and a clipboard. We're ready for you. She rose and walked slowly back into the courtroom. The space looked the same, mahogany, beige walls, the faint hum of the ventilation, but it felt different now. Tense. Unsettled. As everyone retook their seats, Judge Wexler wasted no time. This court has reviewed the submitted recording, and despite its informal nature, I find it both credible and relevant. It directly contradicts Mr. Blake's prior testimony under oath. Ryan shifted. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Additionally, Wexler continued, the language used in the recording toward both the minor child and the child's maternal grandmother raises serious concerns about Mr. Blake's emotional fitness as a guardian. Accordingly, this court is issuing an immediate suspension of unsupervised visitation for Mr. Blake, pending further investigation. Fielding objected, citing lack of context. Wexler didn't blink. Your client's credibility is under review. He may petition the court once CPS completes their evaluation and Ava's court-appointed advocate interviews her directly. The words felt like oxygen. Diane didn't move. She just listened. I am granting temporary custody of Ava Bartlett to her maternal grandmother, Diane Bartlett, Wexler said, glancing at her directly. Effective immediately. Diane didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just let the words land like rain on dry ground. Fielding muttered something under her breath to Ryan, who looked like he'd been hollowed out. His hands gripped the tables. Edged so hard his knuckles went white. As the courtroom emptied, Wexler called Diane back quietly, Mrs. Bartlett. She stepped forward. You were calm today. Precise. Even when things got uncomfortable. Thank you, Your Honor. He paused. I've seen people use children as weapons. Sometimes with the best intentions. I don't think you're one of them. But the system will watch, just as it should. I understand. He leaned back. Keep her safe. I will. Diane walked into the corridor and exhaled so deeply it felt like the first real breath in months. As she stepped outside, sunlight bathed the courthouse steps in a golden glow. The air was warm, soft, summer nearing its end. Diane pulled out her phone and scrolled to a photo of Ava taken 2 weeks earlier. The girl's smile was wide, gap-toothed. She was holding a spoon and a peanut butter jar, her cheeks covered in smudges. There would be more hearings. More hoops. Emily was still gone. Ryan wasn't finished, not really, but Ava was safe, for now, and that was everything. Diane drove home with both hands tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, muscles sore from the tension she hadn't noticed until now. Ava sat in the back seat, her legs swinging slightly, oblivious to the day's gravity. She was humming. Off-key, repetitive, lost in her own rhythm, but it was a melody Diane hadn't heard in weeks. At a red light, Diane glanced at the mirror. Ava's head tilted back, her eyes fixed on the sky through the window. Her small voice floated forward, Are we going to my house or your house? Diane swallowed. To our house, she said softly. For now. Ava nodded once, then returned to humming. The sun was already dipping low by the time they pulled into the driveway. The small bungalow Diane had lived in for 20 years stood quietly under a blooming dogwood tree. A porch light blinked on automatically. Diane helped Ava out of the car, her fingers brushing the child's shoulder as if needing reassurance she was really there. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and something warm, the remnants of the soup Diane had made that morning before court. Ava kicked off her shoes and padded across the hardwood floors without hesitation. She remembered the layout. She always had. In the corner of the hallway stood the nursery. Not much had changed. The twin bed still had the sunflower bedspread, the bookshelf was still overstuffed with bedtime stories, and the baby monitor that had started it all sat quietly on the dresser, unplugged but not forgotten. Diane watched as Ava climbed into the bed without needing to be told. She clutched the stuffed elephant Diane had given her last Christmas and pulled the covers to her chest. Do I have to go back to Daddy's house tomorrow? She asked, voice soft and sudden. Diane sat down on the edge of the bed. Not tomorrow, sweetie. When then? Diane didn't answer right away. She brushed a lock of hair from Ava's forehead, fingers gentle and slow. We're just going to take it one day at a time. Okay? Ava nodded, her eyes already heavy. Can you stay till I fall asleep? I'll be right here. Ava didn't fight it. She simply turned over, hugging the elephant tight. Within minutes, her breathing slowed into the steady rhythm of sleep. Diane stayed seated, the quiet filling the room. Her eyes drifted to the unplugged monitor. For months, it had been recording pieces of their lives, moments no one knew would matter. A silent witness. Now, it was just a plastic shell. But Diane couldn't quite bring herself to throw it away. She turned off the light and slipped into the hallway, leaving the door cracked open just enough to hear Ava's breathing. In the kitchen, the soup was cold. She didn't reheat it, she sat at the table instead, her hands wrapped around a mug of untouched tea, her mind finally daring to think about tomorrow. There would be visits from CPS. Paperwork. Emily, wherever she was, still hadn't called. The voicemail inbox was full. No one knew where she'd gone after her last rehab stint. Diane tried not to go down that mental road. She'd been there too many times. She knew every sharp turn and blind corner. Instead, she opened her old journal and began to write. July 16th. Ava's home. Judge ruled in our favor. Ryan didn't argue. The tape changed everything. For now, Ava sleeps in the bed under the window. The one with the sunflowers. I sat beside her until she drifted off. She asked if she had to go back. I didn't lie. But I didn't promise anything either. That's the truth. That's all I can give her now. She stopped writing. Stared at the words, then added, if Emily could see her now, but she didn't finish the sentence. The next morning would come with more questions. There would be hard days ahead. Ava would ask again. Emily might call. Ryan might appeal, but tonight, Ava was here, and sometimes, a single night of peace was enough to keep going. Morning came softly. The filtered light of summer slipped through the curtains, casting gold across the floor of the quiet house. Diane stirred before the alarm, not because of habit, but because of Ava. Every sound from the small room across the hall sparked an instinct that never really left, the pediatric nurse, the mother, the watcher. She rose and moved through the house barefoot, careful not to wake the child. Ava was still curled beneath the sunflower comforter, one hand resting on the stuffed elephant's trunk, her lips slightly parted in sleep. Diane stood for a moment in the doorway, letting the sight root her. Some mornings, you had to hold still before life started demanding too much of you. Downstairs, coffee brewed with a steady drip, and Diane sat at the table again, the same place where she had written in her journal the night before. She stared at the baby monitor. Unplugged. Silent. But heavy, somehow. Like it still held the voices inside it. She turned her phone over in her hand. Still nothing from Emily. 8 weeks now. 8 long weeks of no calls, no texts, no word. Only silence, a terrifying kind of quiet that came after too many chances had already been given. She opened her messages. Mom, I know I messed up. The text was old, from 4 months earlier. Before rehab. Before Ava had shown up with a bruise on her arm that no one wanted to explain. Her thumb hovered over it. But she didn't delete it. At 9:03 a.m., a knock rattled the door. Diane blinked back to attention. Through the window, she saw a familiar sedan, unmarked, but unmistakably official. CPS. She opened the door to find 2 women on the porch. One she recognized from the courthouse, the one who'd complimented her composure. The other was younger. Hair cropped short, eyes scanning the entryway like a scanner warming up. Mrs. Bartlett, said the first, smiling politely. We're here for the scheduled home check. Diane stepped aside. Of course. Come in. The inspection was thorough. But not invasive. They walked through Ava's bedroom, noted the cleanliness, the safety precautions. The night light, the child-proof window locks. The fridge was stocked. Medications were locked up. Laundry folded. No red flags. The younger caseworker, Carla, jotted notes in a small leather-bound tablet. Do you work currently? She asked. No, Diane replied. I'm retired. I was a pediatric nurse for 33 years. That made them pause. She could see it in their eyes, how that changed the framing. She wasn't a desperate grandmother clutching at custody. She was trained, experienced, steady. Have there been any signs of distress in Ava? Nightmares, regressive behavior? She asked if she had to go back. Diane said plainly. She clings more. Flinches when the dog barks too loud. She doesn't cry much, just watches. They both nodded grimly. Carla looked up. That's common. Before they left, the first woman turned back toward the door. You've done well, Mrs. Bartlett. It shows. Thank you, Diane said. But it's not about me. They left. The house was quiet again. Diane stood still in the middle of the kitchen. She wanted to feel relief, maybe even pride, but instead, there was just this echoing tiredness. Like her body knew it couldn't relax yet. Then the phone rang, the number was unknown, but the city code was familiar. She picked up. Hello? Silence at first, then, Mom? Diane closed her eyes. Emily. Her daughter's voice was hoarse. Tired. Worn out in the way people get when they've fallen so many times they've stopped noticing the bruises. I heard, Emily said. About court. About the audio. Diane said nothing. I'm sorry, Emily continued. I should have protected her. I should have. God, I don't even know where to start. Where are you? Diane asked. Calm. Measured. A shelter. In Reno. Reno. Diane blinked. That was almost 600 miles away. I left the program, Emily said. I didn't relapse. Not this time. But I was scared. I thought maybe Ava was better without me. Diane felt something inside her crack, not shatter, not snap. Just shift in a quiet, irreversible way. You didn't call. I couldn't. Every time I tried, Emily's breath hitched. I felt like I didn't deserve her. Diane leaned against the wall. It's not about deserving. It's about showing up. I want to come back, Emily whispered. I want to see her. Is that even possible? Diane didn't answer right away. She looked toward the stairs, where Ava's small voice was now singing something softly. A made-up song, sweet and off-key. We'll talk, Diane said at last. But not until I see proof. Not words. Proof. I understand. Diane nodded, even though Emily couldn't see it. You lost her trust. And mine. But you can start earning it back. One day at a time. There was a long pause. Thank you, Emily whispered. For not giving up on her. Diane's throat tightened. I never did. That's why you still have a chance. When the call ended, Diane didn't sit. She walked slowly back upstairs and found Ava crouched on the floor, fitting puzzle pieces together in determined silence. Ava looked up. Grandma? Yes, love? Can we paint today? Diane smiled. Yes. Let's get messy. Because sometimes healing wasn't about long speeches or big decisions. Sometimes, it was about staying in the room. Picking up a brush. Adding color back into a life that had been gray for too long. The first supervised visit was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at 1 p.m., in a neutral office 3 blocks from downtown. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the windows overlooked a parking lot filled with sun-baked asphalt and faded white lines. The room was sparse: 2 chairs, a low table with crayons and paper, a wide-eyed woman from CPS named Sharon who had a clipboard and a voice like chamomile. Diane sat in the hallway, clutching her purse with both hands. Her legs were crossed, but her foot tapped rhythmically, not from nerves, exactly, but from something sharper. A readiness. The edge of something she couldn't quite name. Emily was late by 6 minutes, then ten.at 12 minutes. The door opened, she stepped in slowly, smaller than Diane remembered. Hair pulled into a bun that hadn't been brushed cleanly. A wrinkled cardigan over jeans that sagged at the knees. She looked like someone trying to reassemble herself with only half the pieces. Ava, seated at the table already with a red crayon in hand, didn't react at first. She just kept drawing, dragging the wax across the paper in long looping lines. Emily cleared her throat. Hi, sweet pea. No response. Diane watched from the hallway. There was no one-way mirror, no hidden camera, just a narrow glass pane on the door, through which everything felt too intimate and too far away. Sharon encouraged gently. Ava, do you remember who that is? Ava looked up. Mommy, she said. Quiet. Factual. No emotion in the word, not flat, just careful. Emily smiled. It cracked the corners of her mouth, like she wasn't used to doing it anymore. I missed you, she said. Ava nodded and picked up another crayon. There was no rush into arms. No tears. Just Ava, coloring with purpose, and Emily watching her like someone observing their own child through a museum glass case. Precious, delicate, breakable. After 20 minutes, Emily spoke again. Do you want to draw something together? Ava shrugged. I'm drawing a tornado house. Emily blinked. A what? Like the kind that spins you up and makes your tummy fall. Emily looked down at the picture. It was red, black, and sharp. Ava was drawing a tiny figure in a window, arms up, while swirls of dark color filled the rest of the page. Where's that house? Emily asked softly. Ava's voice was barely a whisper. At Daddy's. Diane felt her throat close. Sharon said nothing, just kept her pen moving. The visit lasted 45 minutes. When it ended, Ava stood and held her stuffed elephant tightly, the one Diane had insisted she bring. Emily crouched down. Can I give you a hug? Ava hesitated. Then, slowly, she leaned forward. It wasn't a long hug, more like a bump of foreheads and a cautious touch on the sleeve, but it was something. I love you, Emily said. Ava didn't reply. She took Diane's hand when they met in the hallway, holding it with the casual intensity of a child clinging to their anchor. Emily stood at the door as they walked out, watching. She looked like someone unsure whether she was allowed to cry in public. Back in the car, Ava spoke first. Is mommy sick again? Diane's hand stilled on the steering wheel. She's trying to get better, she said. Is that why she forgot me? No, sweetie. She didn't forget you. She just forgot how to be okay. Ava looked out the window. Did you forget how to? No, Diane said softly. I remembered for both of you. They drove in silence the rest of the way. Home, that night, after Ava went to bed, Diane sat on the couch and opened her laptop. An email waited from Sharon. Subject: Observations, supervised visit number 1. Ava showed guarded behavior toward her mother, no active distress but minimal emotional engagement. Notably, she referenced feeling unsafe at father's home. Recording of exact language attached. Recommend continued observation. Ms. Emily Bartlett was sober, calm, cooperative. Recommend further assessment before extending visitation rights. Diane leaned back. It was the first professional confirmation that Ava's words held weight. She picked up her journal again. July 22nd. First supervised visit. Emily looked fragile but sober. Ava kept a distance. It was like watching a bird stay just out of reach of an outstretched hand. She's protecting herself. I understand that. I hope Emily does too. This isn't about blame. It's about rebuilding. Brick by brick, just as she was about to close it, her phone rang. It was Fielding. Ryan's lawyer. Diane's hand froze. She answered. Mrs. Bartlett, Fielding said, professional but pointed. My client is filing for a retrial. We'll be challenging the admissibility of the audio recording. Diane inhaled once, deeply. Then we'll meet in court. Fielding's voice cooled. I suggest you prepare. He has legal grounds. Diane hung up. The house was quiet. Too quiet. She walked upstairs and peeked into Ava's room. The girl slept on her back now, one arm above her head, the other clutching the elephant. Diane stood in the doorway, watching her breathe. Let them come. She thought that I am not afraid of the truth. The story broke on a Thursday morning. It started as a local headline: Retired nurse challenges custody after shocking audio surfaces in court. By lunchtime, it had spread. The online version included a brief summary of the courtroom drama, an embedded quote from Judge Wexler, and one photo, an old one Diane didn't even know existed, of her standing on the courthouse steps, looking tired and composed. A woman holding her ground. The article was careful not to name Ava directly. But Ryan's name appeared, as did Emily's, struggling with addiction, currently absent, in contact with child services. Diane was labeled maternal grandmother and emergency guardian. She read it at the kitchen table, blinking twice at her name in bold font. Then she closed the laptop slowly, walked to the sink, and ran cold water over her hands until they stopped shaking. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. It wasn't CPS. Not the mail. Not even one of the neighbors dropping off zucchini bread like they used to in quieter times. It was a reporter. He looked young, mid-20s, maybe, with a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and an apologetic smile that meant I know you. Didn't ask for this, but I'm here anyway. Ms. Bartlett? I'm from the Herald Tribune. I just wanted to know, Diane said quietly, and shut the door. She locked it, something she hadn't done in years during the daytime. Later, she called CPS. Left a voicemail. Asked them to ensure Ava's name was shielded. The caseworker called back within an hour, voice calm, reassuring. They were already on it, but the damage had been done. At the grocery store that evening, Diane saw the shift in people's eyes. Some didn't make eye contact. Others did, too much of it. Lingering. Evaluating. In the frozen food aisle, a woman she didn't recognize leaned in close and whispered, "You're brave." He looked like such a good guy in the PDA meetings. We had no idea. Diane smiled. Politely. Said nothing. She didn't know the world. Her story. Back at home, Ava sat on the rug, coloring again. This time it was a castle, blue and gold, with giant flowers growing from its windows. Can castles have elephants inside? Ava asked. They can have anything you want, Diane replied. She watched her for a moment, then moved to the window. Drew the curtain halfway. Part of her felt ridiculous, even paranoid. The other part, the one that had listened to the playback of Ryan's voice a dozen times, memorizing the chill behind his words, didn't feel anything close to safe. The next morning, Diane met with her attorney, a gray-haired woman named Teresa Klein who had worked family law for 28 years. The kind of lawyer who didn't deal in theatrics, just the hard work of piecing broken families into something the system could accept. He's claiming procedural mishandling, Teresa said, flipping through the filed motion. The argument is that the recording was obtained without his knowledge and played in court before a proper authentication process. But it's his voice, Diane said. Yes. But family court isn't criminal court. The bar for admissibility is different. He's arguing invasion of privacy. The fact that the monitor was in his daughter's room complicates things. He didn't know it was recording, Diane said, but he knew he was in a child's nursery. That was his choice. Teresa gave a tight nod. It's not unwinnable. But it's going to stretch. Likely another hearing. Possibly a new judge. Diane exhaled slowly. What about Emily? She asked. She's passed 3 supervised visits. CPS will push for increased access if she maintains sobriety. They'll recommend a reunification plan, slowly, over months. She's on the path, but one wrong step. Teresa trailed off. Diane understood. She went home feeling the way you do when a storm doesn't arrive, not relief, but the gnawing ache of waiting. That night, after Ava was asleep, Diane pulled out a small plastic bin from the back of the hallway closet. Inside were old photos. Emily in braces. Emily holding newborn Ava. Emily, pale and shaking, outside her first detox center, promising this time would be different. Diane traced her finger across 1, then 2, then stopped at a faded photo of herself at 29, holding Emily on a beach in Maine. She had been too young then. She'd thought love was enough. It hadn't been. But it had been the beginning, and now, years later, here she was, love again trying to be enough. Only this time, it had to be smarter. Sharper. Less forgiving. The next supervised visit was scheduled for Sunday. Diane tucked the photo back into the bin, sealed the lid, and returned it to the dark. Some memories were anchors. Others were warnings. She would need both. Sunday's visit took place at a small family therapy center on the edge of town, tucked between a vacant yoga studio and an abandoned bakery. The paint peeled from the window frames, but inside, the walls were decorated with children's drawings and pastel motivational quotes. Every step forward counts. Broken crayons still color. Ava walked in without protest. That was new. She wore overalls with one strap undone, holding her elephant by its ear. Diane had braided her hair that morning, soft and careful, like she used to do for Emily's Emily. Arrived early this time. Diane saw her through the glass door before she entered. Emily paced outside, a small white coffee cup clenched in one hand, her other arm folded across her chest like a barrier. When she stepped in, she looked directly at Diane. Not defiant. Not apologetic. Just present. Hi, she said. Diane nodded. You look rested. I'm trying. Emily glanced at Ava, then quickly looked away. I started the parenting course. And meetings every other day. My sponsor, she said Ava might not hug me back for a long time. I told her I deserved that. Diane studied her daughter for a beat too long. Then stepped aside to let her in. I'll be in the waiting room, she said. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Halvorsen, with warm eyes and a firm handshake, greeted them both and led Ava and Emily into the playroom. Diane watched the door close behind them. Then she sat in a blue vinyl chair in the hallway with an old issue of Parenting Today unopened in her lap. Time moved in strange ways in waiting rooms. Diane's thoughts roamed, not to the hearing with Ryan that loomed on the calendar, not to the court-mandated evaluations or lawyer calls, but to her own childhood. She remembered her mother standing in a different hallway once, in a different decade, outside a school principal's office, waiting for a different kind of news. Diane had skipped class to care for her younger brother after their father didn't come home. She had been 12. Her mother had stood stiff-backed, ashamed. Sometimes, the legacy of women was endurance. 50 minutes later, the door opened. Emily walked out first. Her eyes were red. Not sobbing, just raw. She showed me a drawing, she said softly. A picture of me on a mountain. She said I was trying to climb back down. Diane rose. That's something. Emily gave a fragile smile. She let me braid her hair. That nearly did it. Diane had to look away for a moment, swallow something sharp in her throat. She asked if I was coming home soon. Emily added, what did you say? I told her not yet. That I still had work to do. That I wanted to come home right. Not just come home. Diane didn't answer. As Emily turned to leave, she stopped. Mom, yes? I know you don't trust me yet. I wouldn't either. But, thank you. For keeping her safe. For keeping her soft. Diane stood still. She's not soft because of me. She's soft because somehow, she stayed that way. Despite everything. Emily nodded and walked out. The doors chimed faint behind her. Diane and Ava drove home in comfortable silence. In the back seat, Ava held up the drawing for Diane to see in the mirror. The mountain. A tiny stick figure woman halfway down. Clouds and flowers below. That's Mommy, she said. She's climbing down? Diane asked. She said it's easier to fall than to climb. But climbing is better. Diane blinked once, twice. That's right, sweetheart, she said. It is. That night, after Ava was asleep, Diane logged onto her email. A new message from Teresa, the lawyer. Subject, pre-hearing disclosure, Blake vs. Bartlett, opposing counsel has requested phone records from the week you submitted. The audio. They are pushing to cast doubt on the chain of evidence. Also, Ryan is petitioning for partial visitation rights based on corrected context and monitored sobriety. He claims emotional distress was exaggerated. Our counteraffidavit is ready, but we'll need a written statement from you. Diane's fingers hovered over the keyboard. She could feel it again, the pressure, the expectation to be invulnerable. Prepared, spotless, she began typing. My name is Diane Bartlett. I am the maternal grandmother and current guardian of Ava Blake. The recording submitted to the court was recovered from a baby monitor I did not know was still functioning. I did not alter it. I did not manufacture context. I listened to it once, and I cried. Then I listened again, and I decided that no matter how complicated our lives have been, Ava deserved for someone to believe her reality. She stopped, looked over the words, then continued. She doesn't need a perfect family. She needs a safe one. If that means I have to sit in courtrooms, and write statements, and be the adult who never gets to fall apart, then so be it. I have watched too many people climb out of holes only to slip back in because no one stayed at the edge, waiting with a rope. She clicked send, then turned off the light, because tomorrow, someone would try to argue the tape didn't matter. That Ava misunderstood. That Diane overstepped. That too much time had passed. That maybe, just maybe, the truth was negotiable, but Diane had stopped believing in maybe. She believed in evidence.in endurance and in elephants. The retrial was set for Monday morning. Diane stood in front of her closet at 6 a.m., staring at a row of muted blouses and well-pressed slacks. She didn't need to impress anyone. She wasn't new to this courthouse anymore. But today felt different, like walking into the same fire for the second time, knowing exactly how much it burns. She chose the navy blouse with the stitched cuffs. Ava had once called it the serious shirt. Maybe that was what she needed, to look as unshakable as the truth she carried downstairs. Ava was still asleep. Diane had told her she wouldn't be going to court today. You'll stay with Mrs. Lansing, she'd said the night before, referring to their kind neighbor down the street. You can bring your markers. And your elephant. Ava had nodded. Will the judge be there again? Yes. Will you tell him I don't like the loud voice? I will. And she meant it. At 9:12 a.m., Diane sat in the same courtroom, same wooden bench, but this time, the roles were more defined. Fielding stood with her client, Ryan Blake, dressed in a pale gray suit that fit him too well. His hair was styled. He looked, again, like a man who'd rehearsed fatherhood in the mirror. Her own lawyer, Teresa Klein, sat beside her, reading through the printed statement Diane had emailed 3 nights before. Your voice is clear, Teresa said. Not emotional. Just measured. I'm tired of sounding emotional, Diane replied. Judge Wexler entered with the same slow, calm authority. His robe swayed behind him. He looked directly at Diane for a fraction of a second longer than usual, not friendly, not hostile, just searching. Taking measure, Fielding was first. She stood, voice brisk. Your Honor, we are petitioning for partial custody reinstatement. On the grounds that the submitted audio recording was obtained without consent, presented out of context, and may have been prejudicial. Furthermore, we request a re-evaluation of the minor child's perception, as the emotional responses cited in the original ruling stem from subjective observation rather than clinical assessment. Wexler held up a hand. Do you deny that your client made the statements in the recording? No, Your Honor, Fielding replied. But the tone, the intent, and the surrounding conditions were not properly examined. This court should consider whether the statements were exaggerated under stress, not reflective of the defendant's overall behavior. Ryan leaned forward, elbows on the table, head slightly bowed like he was already practicing remorse. Wexler turned to Teresa. Counselor? Teresa stood slowly, almost casually, as if unbothered by the weight in the room. Your Honor, we don't deny that people say regrettable things in private. But this wasn't a one-time lapse. This was a pattern, one that came to light only because a child's safety was silently at risk. The recording doesn't show a bad day. It shows a man who used intimidation as routine communication with a 4-year-old girl. That's not context. That's character. She turned to Diane. Mrs. Bartlett is not seeking vengeance. She is not erasing Ava's father. She is protecting a child who has been taught to brace herself for outbursts. Then she handed the judge a new folder. Wexler opened it. What am I looking at? Ava's drawings. Submitted to her court-appointed child psychologist during a recent evaluation. He flipped through each page, told a silent story. One showed a stick figure girl under a rain cloud, holding hands with a tall woman labeled Grandma. Another showed a man standing over a bed, arms drawn in heavy red lines. The child psychologist's notes were clipped to the front. Repetitive imagery of shouting figures. Marked signs of hypervigilance. Child associates, quiet, with safe. Strong emotional attachment to maternal grandmother. describes Daddy's house as the place with walking eggshells. The courtroom was quiet. Wexler closed the folder. He looked at Ryan. Mr. Blake, would you like to speak on your own behalf? Ryan stood. Slowly. Like someone who'd rehearsed this too many times. I know I made mistakes, he said. I said things I regret. I was under pressure. But I love my daughter. I want to be a part of her life. She deserves to have her father. I've completed a parenting course. I've started therapy. I'm trying to change. He turned toward Diane. I never meant to hurt her. Diane kept her expression flat. Her heartbeat, however, had begun to climb. Because some things felt familiar. Too familiar. She had heard that same cadence from Emily years ago. The I'm trying. The I never meant to. The versions of remorse that didn't quite ask for forgiveness, but begged for access. Judge Wexler nodded once. Then turned to Diane. Mrs. Bartlett. One last question. Do you believe Mr. Blake is capable of change? Diane inhaled slowly. Thought, yes, she said. I do. Gasps echoed softly behind her. But believing someone can change, she continued, is not the same as believing they should have unsupervised access to a 4-year-old child while they're still learning how. The silence was absolute. Wexler tapped the desk lightly. I've reviewed all submitted materials. I've spoken with the child advocate. And I've listened, not just to the recording, but to what this court has become since it began, a mirror, reflecting how adults behave when children can't protect themselves. He looked at Ryan. Your words weren't isolated. They were instructive, to a child learning how much fear she should carry into every room. Then to Diane, and your vigilance, while extraordinary, is not infinite. The system must now carry its share. He cleared his throat. Unsupervised visitation is denied. Supervised visitation may be requested on a limited basis, with therapist oversight. Custody remains with Mrs. Bartlett until further review. The gavel fell. It sounded like release. Back home, Diane found Ava in the backyard with Mrs. Lansing. Covered in dirt, building a castle for ants near the flower bed. The child ran to her immediately, arms out, elephant trailing behind her. Did the judge say we have to go back? No, Diane said, lifting her up. Not today. Ava rested her head against Diane's shoulder, and for the first time in a very long time, she whispered something that made Diane's knees nearly buckle. I don't feel scared today. Diane closed her eyes. Neither do I, she whispered back. The days after the ruling passed slowly, like fog lifting from a long storm. No more emergency calls. No courtrooms. No microphones or statements or confrontations. Just the ordinary things that had once felt unreachable: cereal on the kitchen table, sidewalk chalk, bedtime stories read twice instead of rushed. Ava began humming again. She had always hummed. Even when she was nervous, maybe especially then. But lately, the tune had changed. Less looping. Less repetitive. There was something lighter in it now, like the child finally believed she was somewhere she didn't have to whisper. Diane noticed. She also noticed that Ava no longer asked when she'd be going back to her father's house. That question had disappeared, not from memory, but from immediate fear. What hadn't disappeared was the other question: is Mommy coming back soon? Diane never answered quickly. Je ne vais pas. But she didn't give promises she couldn't keep. Not after all these years. Not after so many calls that ended with silence or sirens. She's still working on getting better, Diane would say. When she's strong and safe enough to be here, she will be. And Ava would always nod like she understood, even if she didn't. Then Sunday came, the next scheduled visit. This one wasn't supervised by CPS. It was at Diane's house, a step forward approved under cautious conditions. Emily had submitted to random drug testing, passed every one. She'd completed her 4th parenting class, now volunteering once a week at a recovery center's daycare. Her progress was real, visible, but fragile. Diane didn't decorate. She didn't buy balloons or bake cookies. She cleaned the kitchen, set the kettle on, and laid out crayons on the living room table. She wanted the day to feel real, not staged. If they were rebuilding something, it needed to start where they'd broken it, at eye level. In the middle of a lived-in room, Emily arrived on time. She wore clean jeans, a pale green blouse, and nervousness like a second skin. She looked better than she had in months. Brighter, more focused, but still someone learning to carry her own weight again. Diane met her at the door. No hug. Just a quiet, come in. Ava was in the hallway. Frozen in place when she saw her mother. Emily crouched slowly. Hi, baby. Ava didn't move. Emily waited. After a long silence, Ava walked forward and touched the side of her mother's hand. Not quite a hug, not quite a reach, but a gesture that said, I remember you. I don't know yet if I trust you. But I'm here, and that was enough. They sat at the table and colored for a while. Emily didn't try to force conversation. She didn't ask questions. She just drew. A house. A garden. A small cat with crooked ears. Ava glanced at her every few minutes, unsure of what to do with this version of her mother, the quiet one, the soft one, the one who didn't smell like exhaustion or leave in the middle of the night. Diane watched. From the kitchen, when Ava went outside to play, Emily remained seated, eyes following her daughter through the window. She doesn't look away from you, Diane said gently. I know. You can't mess this up again. Emily turned. I won't. Diane nodded once. Not because I say so. Because she deserves better. I know that too. A long silence, then Emily said, do you ever feel like she loves you more than she ever loved me? Diane exhaled. Not sharply, slowly, like she'd been asked to open a door that had remained shut for years. No. She doesn't love me more. She just knows I stayed. Emily blinked. That's not an insult, Diane added. It's just the shape of love she understands right now. Emily stared at the window again. How long does it take? For what? To earn back a child's trust. Diane didn't answer right away, then she said, as long as it takes. And every day after that. Emily stayed 2 hours. Ava let her braid her hair again. They read half a storybook before Ava wandered off to feed the neighbor's cat. When Emily left, she didn't cry. She didn't beg for more time. She just said, thank you, and walked to her car without looking back. That night, Diane sat beside Ava in bed. Did you like seeing Mommy today? She asked. Ava nodded. She was quieter, she said. I like when people are quiet. Diane smiled. Me too. Ava paused. Did you ever leave your mommy? Diane blinked. She left me first, she said softly. A long time ago. Before I even knew it. Did you find her again? No. But I found you. Ava smiled, eyes closing. That's better. Later, after Ava had fallen asleep, Diane sat alone in the living room. The crayons were still out. A drawing lay on the table, stick figures holding hands in front of a small house. No clouds. Just sun. She picked up the picture, folded it carefully, placed it in a drawer she rarely opened, because some things you hold on to not for what they are, but for what they could mean later. And this? This meant hope. The first time Diane let go of control was on a Thursday. She didn't plan it that way. In fact, she hadn't planned to let go at all. But healing has a way of arriving in disguise, dressed like exhaustion, or quiet mornings, or a tired young woman standing on your porch asking if she can try again. Emily arrived unannounced, not dramatically. Not with tears or some reckless plea for forgiveness. Just with a backpack, a folder of paperwork, and 2 neatly folded envelopes, one addressed to CPS, the other to Diane. I had an interview today, she said. For a medical assistant program at the community college. I brought the confirmation letter. And the counselor signed off on my sobriety milestones. 89 days. Diane stood still. Emily handed her the second envelope. This one's just for you. Diane didn't open it right away. She motioned Emily inside, and they sat at the kitchen table, the same place where the first hearing email had landed, where CPS had called with their initial concerns, where Ava had drawn her tornado house. Ava was with Mrs. Lansing again, helping water her hydrangeas. She didn't know Emily was here. That was deliberate. I'm not asking to move in, Emily said. I'm not asking for overnights. I just want to be present. In a real way. Grocery runs. Saturday cartoons. Packing her backpack. I want her to see that I'm not a visitor anymore. Diane opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Neat penmanship. A kind of reverence in the way the lines curled. Mom, I've spent most of my life believing I had more time. To fix things. To come back. To be better. I thought if I got sober, I'd be handed a fresh start like a prize I earned. But Ava doesn't need a new version of me. She needs the one who stays. The one who apologizes and then proves it. You've done the hard work. All of it. You held the line when no one else could. But I'm ready to stand beside you now. Not behind you. Not disappearing. Beside you. If you say no, I'll understand. But I won't give up. Emily. Diane read the letter twice, then she placed it on the table and looked at her daughter. You're really doing it, she said. Not a question. I am, Emily whispered. But I'm scared. Because part of me still believes I'll ruin everything. Diane's eyes didn't waver. That part of you will never go away completely, she said. But it doesn't get to drive the bus anymore. You do. They sat in silence, the air between them finally free of old landmines. No rehashing. No accusation. Just 2 women staring down the wreckage they'd walked through, and realizing they were both still standing. That weekend, Diane took a risk. She invited Emily to stay for dinner. Nothing fancy. Spaghetti, a salad, lemonade. Ava didn't ask questions when Emily set the table or grated cheese. She just watched. Every move catalogued, every gesture weighed. After dinner, Emily offered to help Ava with her bath. Diane hesitated, then she said, okay. I'll be down the hall. From the kitchen, Diane heard them laugh. Soft splashes. A made-up song about shampoo. It wasn't perfect, Ava still didn't talk as much, and Emily occasionally hesitated, like she didn't know what normal looked like. But they were trying. Together later, after Ava had gone to bed, Diane walked out to the porch. Emily followed, holding 2 mugs of tea. She didn't flinch when I raised my voice, Emily said. When I laughed too loud. That used to make her duck her head. Diane nodded. She remembers everything. But she lets go slowly. Emily looked out into the quiet neighborhood. The sky was purple with early dusk. You know, she said softly, when I was little and scared, you used to leave a flashlight at the foot of my bed. You said if I could see the floor, I'd never be lost. I remember. I think Ava sees the floor again now. Diane's throat tightened. She set down her mug and reached into her pocket. Pulled out a small item. Wrapped in a tissue, an old silver charm on a fraying string. Emily gasped. The rope. You made it at camp. When you were 9. Said it was a safety rope to pull me in if I ever got lost. I can't believe you kept it. I keep a lot of things, Diane said, placing it in her daughter's hand. But this one, maybe it's yours again now. Emily's eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She just held the string like it meant something she couldn't say out loud. That night, Diane wrote in her journal. August 12th. I gave her the rope. Not because I fully trust her yet, but because I want to. I've protected Ava like she was the last soft thing in a world of sharp corners. But maybe I don't have to protect her from her mother forever. Maybe the story can bend. Not erase. Just bend. She closed the book. Upstairs, Ava stirred in her sleep. Diane stood in the hallway, between 2 bedrooms, one with a child dreaming of castles and crayons, and the other with a mother relearning how to stay. She didn't know what chapter 12 would bring, but for the first time in a long while, she was ready. The leaves started to change in early September. It wasn't dramatic, just a slow fade at first. Tips of maple trees kissed with gold, early mornings cooler, sweaters pulled out of drawers. The neighborhood shifted with it. Children walked to school with backpacks too big for their frames. Lawns stayed damp past noon. The air held that unmistakable scent of something ending and something beginning. In Diane's house, the shift was quieter but just as real. There were new routines now. Emily came 3 days a week, stayed for dinner twice, and had been invited. Cautiously, deliberately, to stay over one weekend under Diane's roof, sleeping on the pullout in the guest room. There had been no incidents. No raised voices. No forgotten pickups or skipped check-ins, just effort. Steady, present effort. Ava responded slowly. She didn't call her mommy right away. Sometimes it was Emily. Sometimes just, hey. But she asked for her more. Drew her more. And once, during a Saturday picnic in the backyard, Diane overheard Ava whisper, "You smell like soap and hugs now." It wasn't poetry. But it was enough. One morning, a letter arrived from the county court. Diane held it in her hands for several minutes before opening it. The envelope was thick, the seal crisp. Ava was at preschool. Emily was in her parenting class. The house was silent, no cartoons, no coffee brewing, just the weight of a sealed envelope and 1,000 hours of worry folded inside. She opened it. Case number 712 FAM, 23 custodial status update, Ava Bartlett, minor, following completion of supervised visitations, therapeutic assessments, and behavioral stability reports provided by Child Protective Services, the court recognizes the measurable rehabilitation of Emily Bartlett. Given sustained compliance and the successful reintegration of safe parental involvement, it is hereby recommended that legal guardianship remain with Diane Bartlett through December, with biweekly family therapy scheduled for transition planning. No custody reversal is mandated at this time. Continued shared caretaking is strongly advised. Diane sat at the table for a long time after reading. It wasn't a full return. It wasn't a reset. It was measured trust, the kind that comes not with fanfare, but with soft mornings and documented growth. The kind that says, you're not there yet, but you're walking toward it. That evening, after Ava fell asleep on the couch mid-movie, Emily helped carry her to bed. Together, they tucked her in, fixed the elephant under her arm, and stood in the doorway without speaking. Then, Emily whispered, "You could have cut me out completely. You would have had the right." "I didn't want the right," Diane said. "I wanted the truth." They stood in silence for a moment longer. "Mom," Emily said, "I'm staying." Diane turned. "I know. No, I mean, even when it's hard. Even if the court never gives me back full custody. Even if Ava still hesitates when I reach for her. I'm staying. I'll drive her to school. I'll fold laundry. I'll be the boring mom if that's what she needs. I'll be the one who shows up late to soccer practice with the wrong snacks. I'll be there." Diane didn't cry. She wanted to. Instead, she said, that's all she ever needed. Emily smiled. Not a perfect one. Not the kind you give for cameras. But the kind you give when your soul starts to believe in itself again. Fall deepened. Ava dressed as a ladybug for Halloween. Emily sewed her the wings by hand, and Diane watched from the porch as the child ran up and down the sidewalk, collecting candy, her wings crooked but full of joy. On Thanksgiving, they ate at the kitchen table. Just the three of them. No other guests. No distractions. Ava drew turkeys on napkins and insisted on saying what she was thankful for: Grandma, Mommy, and the elephant. In that order. Diane laughed. Emily rolled her eyes playfully. It was simple. Beautifully, impossibly simple. On the first snowy morning of December, Diane took out her journal one last time. She didn't write pages. Just a paragraph. December 3rd. She stayed. Not just Emily, but Ava. Her softness. Her laughter. Her resilience. The storm came. It nearly washed us all away. But here we are. Not repaired. Not fixed. Just honest. Just showing up. She folded the page and tucked it into the front cover, next to the custody letters, the CPS reports, and the picture Ava drew of the three of them holding hands under a blue crayon sky. No one got rescued in this story. No perfect endings. No absolution, but they were still together, still reaching, still climbing, and sometimes, that was everything.